I can't remember what I was saying. Okay. Let me think. This is a specimen of Titanoboa that we found the last time we went to the Cerrejón coal mine. And there are many different bones associated with this one individual, which made us very excited when we found it. You can see here is a plaster jacket of this specimen, a piece of this specimen. There are many plaster jackets, but this is one piece. And this piece shows several different bones that are part of the backbone of the snake. Most snakes are composed primarily of backbones when it comes to the bones that are there once the rest of the body decays. So that's usually what you find in the fossil record. Here are the individual vertebrae, here laying right next to each other, there, as we found them in the field. These have been prepared away from the matrix. And then overlaying and underlaying these vertebrae are ribs, which you can see down here, which are very broken. So eventually we will prepare these bones further out of the jacket once we've finished cleaning every little piece, and glue them back together and start to assemble what the whole skeleton of the snake would have looked like. This is an example of one of the bones that we've prepared out of a jacket like this of this animal. And this is a large vertebra of Titanoboa. This is about average size, somewhere in the range of an adult Titanoboa, somewhere in the range of around 48, 50 feet long. And here is a similar vertebra from a similar part of the body of a 17-foot long anaconda for comparison. So you can see how much larger Titanoboa is than this 17-foot long anaconda. But you don't get a sense of how big the body was just by looking at the backbone, because of course there's a whole body that would have surrounded this, this vertebra. Here's a rib that we prepared out, certainly not the largest rib of Titanoboa, but it gives you a sense of it. It's fairly complete, and you can start to see how that would have, if the rib articulated onto the bone like that, you get a sense of sort of the contour of the outer part of the snake. Again, that's compared to a similar rib of a 17-foot long anaconda. And what we figured out about Titanoboa in terms of how big around it would have been is that it was actually so wide that at the widest point, as it was slithering by me, it would probably come up to around somewhere between my knees and my waist as it was slithering by. So that's quite an impressive snake. What was also really exciting to us when we found this specimen was that we also found parts of its skull. So for example, here is part of the upper jawbone of Titanoboa, and it looks kind of small until you look at a similar bone of a very large anaconda. So this piece right here corresponds to this area right there, but that much of this bone here in the anaconda. So you can see that this bone, if it weren't all broken up, would have been quite a bit longer for Titanoboa. Likewise, if you look at the lower jaw of an anaconda, this bone here corresponds to this one here, and this bone here corresponds to that portion right there of that lower jaw. So in the end, what we could determine was that these pieces of the skull, even though they're fragmentary, would have belonged to a snake skull that would have been somewhere around that large, which is a huge skull for a snake. And it's actually very consistent with if you back out how big of a snake it would have been to have a skull that size, it's very consistent with our body mass estimates from the rest of the skeleton of around 48 or 50 feet long.